We are here at Polis in Czech Republic, Prague, and right now there's the hackathon taking place. It's called Hackatoshi's Flying Circuit, and actually it's one of the major events of Polis this year. The next major event is going to be the Hackers Congress. It's the 6th annual big summit of like hackers and cryptocurrency researchers, programmers and such. So if you want to take part in of Hackers Congress, check it out at hcpp.com. And as a part of this Hackatoshi's Flying Circuit, this hackathon, I would like to do some interviews with interesting participants. And one of these participants is Michael. So welcome, Michael, and I would like to talk to you about like the beginnings of Bitcoin, because from what I understand, you've actually been a part of the cryptography mailing list, where Satoshi sent like the first message that he came up with this system for the Bitcoin. So if you could, can you actually recall like the first reading of the email and what were your opinion back then?
Yeah, it was just one of many mailing lists that I was on, and you know, I mean, the Cypherpunks mailing list was pretty thick with conversations and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to read. It's also like being on the Well is another old so internet forum, and it was just one of the things that came across.
Okay.
Just came across, and it's like, okay, yeah, and not really. So I mean, it's not like this mail showed up and it was like, you know, with bells and whistles and you knew what it was. It was just like another topic thread, you know. I can't really recall if I, you know, how quickly I even, you know, followed the thread or not.
Yeah. So what was like the first moment you started to think about it like more seriously or more deeply and read up more like the white paper itself and such? Was there any such moment?
Sure. I mean, you know, there's this whole thread that everybody links and cites on the P2P Foundation website. So Michael Ballins has been running that for a number of years, and that I think I was probably like more interested at that point, and you know, like read what people were talking about and thinking about it. You know, there's a whole discussion about e-gold and Liberty dollars and you know, sort of like the challenges to it. I think most people were pretty you know, skeptical, I guess, at the time. About it. It was, you know, an interesting proposal, but I think it really took a lot more time for it to sink in with everybody and with me as well. I would have to say that even though people in my hackerspace in Vienna, MetaLab, were playing around with mining and stuff, and I tried to get Bitcoin D running and install the things, and it you know, it just didn't really. It wasn't really an easy thing for me, so I didn't give it so much weight, and my attention was elsewhere. So you know, so WikiLeaks was doing what they were doing, and Anonymous was getting born, and Occupy Wall Street, and Arab Spring, and all of these things. And it wasn't really until 2011 when the things that I was involved with, where Bitcoin really crossed my path again, which is when WikiLeaks was blockaded by PayPal.
Sure. And
MasterCard and Visa. Yeah. And at that time I was doing like, you know, political art memes sort of stuff in real time on Twitter.
So once it like intervened, you know, like political activism or stuff like
so
this.
that was kind of like the first point at which there was really, beyond the technical aspects of being like non-state money and solving the Byzantine generals problem, and you know, so this trustless exchange and everything, that was really like a use case all of a sudden that was relevant to me and the things that I was involved with socially, and that WikiLeaks had to start taking donations in Bitcoin, and that's when the light bulb went off for me, as like, oh, okay, this could actually work. Yeah, and so then it was about motivating people and it became about educating people. How do I get Bitcoin so it is that I can donate to WikiLeaks?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a whole group of people that are obviously, so privacy researchers, InfoSec people,
So did you
coders and hackers.
actually donate it to WikiLeaks back then in Bitcoin? And
Yeah, of course.
How did you
Yeah,
obtain
sure.
the Bitcoin?
Sure.
Did you have to mine it?
Well, I just bought some from one of the kids in my hackerspace.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, really,
Yeah.
just like, okay, here,
Yeah. So what was like the community at the time around you that was interested in Bitcoin? Was it like the people in hackerspaces or like political activists, or were they more like into like monetary economics or the technical stuff or the social consequences?
The earliest Bitcoin people that I remember, the earliest Bitcoin fanatics or experts that I remember having conversations with were either physics professors or gamblers.
Okay.
So people who were into poker, because they immediately got the game theory aspect of it and the thermodynamics of it. So physics professors were. There was this crazy Ukrainian guy and that ended up losing everything with Mt. Gox. That was a professor at the University of Vienna, and he was talking in 2012 about he was building heating rigs for people in Ukraine and Russia. The people were heating their apartment and making money back in 2012. Yeah. So the earliest people that I remember were not really people who were about economics. It was classically crypto anarchists, people from Chaos Computer Club, hacker mailing lists, hacker spaces, maker spaces, people who had a political bent, crypto anarchists. The libertarians then jumped on it really quick. The whole Ayn Rand crowd and those things, and that started like mixing. And stuff, yeah. So those were the earliest people that I remember having discussions with about Bitcoin.
So when you say like you knew someone who had like a big stash of Bitcoins and lost it all, like do you know how these people later on, what's their view on Bitcoin, and are they still involved in some way, or did they just shut this whole chapter of their life?
Well, it's 2019 and Bitcoin's 10 years old.
Yeah.
And going around to conferences and having such a large community grow up around Bitcoin and stuff, everybody's got stories about wallet keys that they lost, hard drives that they can't remember where they put them. I've known different kinds of people, like this guy that I'm talking about. At the time that Mt. Gox collapsed, I think he had, I don't know, $300,000 or $400,000 in Bitcoin at that time.
That's huge.
That was a lot, yeah. And he really went into a tailspin, a lot of drinking and just absolute total depression. It was pretty much a shitty situation for him. And I know people that have just gone on, I mean. I know people that made art about it, like the guys at Riot in Vienna also, who have a space there where they do the Ethereum meetups, and they're the Institute of they do crypto economic research. They're the publishers of the paper that's upstairs here.
Yeah, Future Crypto Economics.
Yeah, it's Future Crypto Economics. They had when Vitalik came to Buterin came to speak there about Ethereum. They had shredded computers that had at that time, this is 4 years ago, that had at that time $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. So the hard drives shredded that were encrypted hard drives, yeah, that they didn't know the password for the encrypted hard drives.
Okay.
So they took their mining rig with the hard drives and everything, and they put it through a shredder, and they made a piece of art about it.
Okay.
And it was an art piece when Vitalik came to talk
nice
about Ethereum. I have a great picture of that. Yeah. So I've known a lot of different ways that people have dealt with it. Most people. Most of the people that I know who have either lost their wallets or lost Bitcoins in very different ways are pretty stoic about it. It's not. It's just kind of like it's just part of the process. And none of those people were really motivated to get a Lambo.
Yeah.
You know,
For
so
sure. Yeah.
it's a certain type of person.
Yeah.
all
The
those
early
traders
community
and-
wasn't looking to get rich, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So traders and that whole to the moon crowd and everything are, you know, a later social group, you know, a later culture than the people that I was involved with or whatever.
So you said before you were involved in a Bitcoin Foundation, right? So what was it like, and do you think it was overall like a good project, or was it like a nonsensical project from the beginning?
No, it definitely wasn't nonsensical from the beginning. I mean, you know, it's a pretty colorful group of characters that established the Bitcoin Foundation. You know, Roger Ver and Peter Vesnes and Patrick Merck, a great lawyer, John Matonis. You know, it was actually formed at a time, you know, with like a sort of dream of being, you know, the Mozilla Foundation, and Gavin was there as the chief scientist, and you know, it was in its way a serious attempt to educate people about Bitcoin. So it had I joined the Bitcoin Foundation willingly. I was proud to be part of it, and it imploded pretty rapidly actually. Because of a number of reasons. I mean, you know, there was volatility in the market and then differing ideas. The board could never actually, you know, come to. They didn't have really an effective governance process. You know, there was just a lot of tensions. So when I joined the Bitcoin Foundation was actually right before. So John Matonis came through Vienna on his way to go to talk to Swift to inform them about Bitcoin, and he just pinged me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, let's have a coffee," and so you know, we were just having a coffee, and then he told me that the Bitcoin Foundation needed a new website, and if I would be up for doing the website. I was like, yeah, sure, and he's like, okay, cool. And then he went to Swift, and like a week later, I get a phone call from him, and he's like, and Mt. Gox is collapsing. And he's like, Michael, could you handle Mark Karpelis has the domains register the domains for the Bitcoin Foundation and for the repos and everything. All of the domains are in Mark's control, and he's not picking up the phone. And Roger Ver is flying down to Japan to get the passwords for the domains so that Gavin can sign the binaries for the latest release of Bitcoin. And there was a bug at that time. Just a lot of crazy stuff was happening right at that time. And I was like, you know, yeah, okay. So that was how I actually started working at the Bitcoin Foundation, was right when Mt. Gox was collapsing. And like getting a phone call from Roger and him talking to me, like, you know, telling me what you know, half of the password on the telephone, and then sending me half of the password via email, and
well,
like really
crazy times.
Yeah, like crazy times, right? And so then you know, so people were saying that, so Mark resigned from the board. Then Charlie Shrem got arrested for participating in enabling Silk Road's fiat on-ramp. So these things were, I think that the problem with the Bitcoin Foundation is they were incapable of doing, you know, proper public communications about what was going on. So that led people to think that they were intransparent and whatever. They just didn't, you know, they just didn't know what to do and what to say.
Yeah, I think they were like.
It's not like they were unserious people or something. They're all
they just wanted to educate people about Bitcoin, and then it just blew up everything. And they were not like PR or marketing people, right? So they probably didn't.
We had tensions inside. We had tensions and arguments inside of the communications team, and it wasn't easy to do things in the Bitcoin Foundation. And there was attempts to involve the community, and I was managing the forums, and you know, the debates between what the direction of Bitcoin were taking place on the forums back in those days about whether it was a payment rail or whether it was a store of value. And you know, people like Oliver Jensen were on the forums, and Amir Taki and these people, Kyle, and you know, so these arguments were happening there. Those divisions, which later ended up in Bitcoin forking, were pretty early visible. But on the other side, so was the idea of Lightning, was, you know, before the paper even got written. So the ideas of the Lightning Network were even being discussed back in that time. So it was interesting, and it was the nexus of what was going on around Bitcoin. So I mean, I was involved in setting up the payment rails for the contributions for people to become members, and that way I was involved with companies like BitPay, which I hate to this day, and Coinbase and Circle, and we did the Bitcoin conferences as well. So there was, and it was a small community, and then you had access to everybody and being able to talk to them, and so I guess I was an insider to in a part of the play that that from outside looked looked like a piece of shit basically, but it really wasn't such a piece of shit as people make it out to be. But So then so John Matonis then retired and passed on the torch, and we had the whole thing around Brock Pierce and Bruce Fenton. And all of those people. So it was an interesting time, trying to find a governance process for the Bitcoin Foundation. But, things were just moving so fast, and it just overtook the Bitcoin Foundation's relevance. So so Gavin left, right, and started doing Bitcoin Classic, I think, and which I think was a smart decision at that time, having competing clients or whatever. But he got a lot of heat for that. I think Gavin has gotten really. Has been raked over the coals unfairly by people.
Was he the one that Craig supposedly showed the evidence that he's Satoshi? I think it was Gavin, right?
Yeah. So both Matonis and Gavin.
Did you talk to them later? Did they ever say what he showed them or anything?
Well, I mean, I still talk with Matonis here and there, and I was just I was kind of surprised that so from what I know about Bitcoin and whatever, I was kind of surprised that he believed Craig Wright. He's never really, he sort of moved on and not really been, so public about it, but I think it's pretty clear that they weren't paying probably such close attention. It's probably, a certain amount of star allure. Here's the guy that shows you something that, whatever. I never talked with Gavin about it.
Okay.
But I did talk with Matonis about it later at some point, and I think that they just kind of got scammed, basically. Well,
So 10 years later...
the whole thing, so what we're seeing coming out in court with the Tulip Trust and whatever, I think that, they probably got showed some of those early documents of the Tulip Trust and all of this stuff, and you know what I mean? And then I don't remember if Matonis if he signed a transaction in front of Matonis, and I can't speak for what happened with Gavin other than what Gavin said publicly, but, I think he probably saw, because Matonis went to work at Enchain. Which was
the Wright's company.
Yeah, for Wright's company, which he left pretty quickly. I think he was there for 8 or 12 months, and then he moved on to do other things. But Matonis is an anarchist. He's actually an anarchist.
Yeah, so it's, for example, Roger Ver. I agree with him pretty much on everything in terms of political philosophy, but in terms of Bitcoin philosophy, it's something else.
Yeah. So in terms of Matonis, I mean, he's a pretty straight up guy. John's an honest man, and I think he got so blue eyed and just sort of
sure.
Well,
it happens in this industry all the time.
Yeah.
So over the
fooled in good faith would be a way to put it. Yeah.
So 10 years later, are you still working for some Bitcoin companies, or what are you up to now?
So after I left the Bitcoin Foundation, I didn't really do anything for quite some time. That was 2015. I worked together with Vinay Gupta, who was the launch manager for Ethereum when he wanted to do a crypto fund. It was called Hexier Capital before he decided to start Materium. So I was working with Vinay on a venture capital fund, and then through that I met Jared Hope and Carl Bennett from Status. and that was during the 2017 so ICO phase, and I ended up going to work at Status after they did their ICO to work on this messaging client built on the Whisper protocol on Ethereum. Status is a great company, and then last year they during the crypto winter cut 40% of staff.
Yeah.
I was one of the unnecessary staff members to focus, and they wanted to focus more directly on the promises of their white paper, the use cases for their token. So that was in December of last year, and then most recently I've just joined the Trustlines Foundation, Trustlines Foundation, which is a people-powered money is the use case. It's a side chain on Ethereum that is using the parity Aura proof of authority consensus algorithm, but it's been adopted to be a minimally viable proof of stake side chain to Ethereum. That's going to be launching in August, and that's what I'm doing now. Is communications for the Trustlines Foundation.
Okay. And so you actually like adapted Ethereum a bit. Like it's not like your Bitcoin only, right?
No. I'm agnostic. I was the first person who ever tweeted about Ethereum. When Vitalik published to his blog, I was the first person that ever tweeted about it. That's kind of like one of my street cred sort of things, which I find quite amusing. There was a lot of stuff going on at that time. A lot of discussions, and Ethereum was also something that I could have participated in and gotten at its cheap price. I didn't, because it was just an intellectually interesting thing. He originally wanted to build it on Bitcoin. Everybody in Bitcoin went, get away, and so so in the last year, let's say the last 2 years or so, the incessant bleeding of Bitcoin maximalists online has gotten pretty stale. I think the Lightning Network, watching the Lightning Network happen and grow, technologically and socially, is an interesting phenomenon. I like the work that Blockstream's done with the Blockstream satellite and those things. Liquid. There's not so much interesting stuff going on in Bitcoin in terms of crypto, projects. So use cases.
Not much like experimentation.
And it shouldn't be.
I would
And
say.
it shouldn't be. I mean, Bitcoin it's this conservative, stodgy, sturdy network, that provides a pretty solid SOV use case. The MOE is what
like means of exchange
is what Lightning is doing. I don't really personally, I don't see Bitcoin scaling as the currency that everybody is going to be using. So there's going to have to be some sort of scaling solution. I think that the average user prefers a custodial solution.
You think so?
Yeah, I do. Look at the market. People have their money on Coinbase. They have their crypto on Coinbase.
Of like simple UX and such, right?
Yeah. So the whole idea of everybody being their own bank, I don't think is ever really going to be the mass adoption use case for Bitcoin. I also don't think that it's a black hole that's going to suck the world's currency into it. I think it's an interesting store of value asset use case that will remain. But the interesting experimentation with variations of the technology, so token economic systems, digital provenance, digital twins like Materium's doing, copyright use cases for digital art like Super Rare, built on an ERC20. So the whole thing about non-fungible tokens and copyright and digital provenance, these things are all, most stuff doesn't need to be on a blockchain, and we only need a blockchain for censorship resistance. So we can see that there's certain types of content that need to have censorship resistance, like let's say, I particularly don't like Gab, but we all
like the social site.
Yeah, so you either believe in free speech or you don't, and free speech means everybody gets to say whatever it is that they want, right? So there is potentially at some point a blockchain crypto-based, secure platform, but nobody solved the storage stuff. Filecoin and IPFS haven't been able to really deliver, although they were also a large IPO. I love Juan Benet's work, and then you have Swarm on Ethereum as well, and Chia, from Bram. There's all of these things that are happening in the space, which are interesting to me. Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting, idealistic, talented people in Ethereum, and so it's a much more comfortable place, or an interesting place to actually work if you're into this stuff than Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's like I like to call it like a laboratory of experimental economics, where people sort of interact with the projects with their own money. So there's actually skin in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you kind of quickly see what has some kind of merit and what doesn't. And I guess
there's tons of that happening in the space. There's so many amazing Aragon, an amazing set of tools and things that they're doing around governance. You have Colony, you have DAOstack, you have Blockstack. There's Giveth, Gitcoin, Bounties Network. There's all of these different parts of the ecosystem that are the next generation Web3 tech stack. That I've been online since 1982. So I I went to university to get an email address, and so it was like just out of ARPANET days when I went when I went online and stuff. And so watching the internet's the tech stack getting re-architected and correcting some of the mistakes that people in my generation were either too lazy or not foresightful enough to implement, it's like a second chance. It's a second childhood for me intellectually, is watching all of these, and that stuff is happening in Ethereum more than it is in Bitcoin, and it should be happening there, right? So, and then there's Monero is interesting, Zcash is interesting, Zuko is an amazingly interesting guy who's been around for a while. I mean, and the Zcash play is to be building the tools that eventually, theoretically, that Bitcoin could adopt. Yeah, that's really what Zcash is about. Most people don't understand that whole thing would just go to sleep if actually they brought the tech to a certain level that could be adopted and put into the Bitcoin coin base. So Bitcoin is the mother of all chains, and any of the advancements that are going to happen in blockchain, based systems can potentially be put into Bitcoin.
Yeah, some of them.
Not everything, but so the things that can possibly be, they can be taken from other chains. Any of the things that are successful, there's no reason why Bitcoin cannot.
Yeah, and it's
it'll be an interesting social process and a governance process, but it is possible that advancements made by other chains. Now we have Polkadot and what Parity's doing. They have the Kusama, they have their test network Kusama, where people can play around. So, there's just a lot of smart people that are, like you say, that have a lot. They have a playground to do.
Yeah, it's good. It's not happening on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I may earn in Ethereum or other tokens, but I keep it in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Yeah. So let's get back finally, final remarks to the hackathon itself. So there are 3 tracks, like privacy, decentralization, and urban hacktivism. So are you taking part in any of that, or are you the judge, or what's the most interesting stuff about this hackathon for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's happening in Paralelnipolis. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a sister organization from MetaLab, which I'm involved with in Vienna, and is a community partner for ETH Berlin. So I've been working. I've been doing the speaker tracks for ETH Berlin, which is in August, and so Josef asked me if I'd come and participate as a judge. So it's a community cooperation between ETH Berlin and Paralelnipolis and Paralelnipolis that I'm.
Okay, so you will be the judge, and
one of them, yeah.
What kind of field do you think is the most interesting here, or any of them?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that for me, closest to my heart would be privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Urban hacktivism is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of forms of urban hacktivism. I used to drive around cities and project using a video beamer and project graffiti on walls and photograph it, and
Yeah.
and so that could be called urban hack. So doing political messaging
Uh-huh.
with video graffiti and stuff. So I mean, there could be something interesting like that.
Yeah. Sure.
Decentralization, I think is kind of a buzzword. I mean, there's very few things that are decentralized. We can even argue about how decentralized Bitcoin is.
Mm-hmm. It's a scale, basically.
It's a question of scale, right? So, I would have to say that I'm probably most interested in the stuff that people are going to come up with privacy.
Okay. So, do you still have open spots for ETH Berlin?
As a speaker?
Well,
Or what?
Oh, as a participant.
Oh yeah,
let's say.
you can still apply to hack.
So, what's the site?
ETH Berlin 2, so ETH Berlin
2, like in German. Yeah.
German2.com.
Okay.
And you can apply to hack there. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll see each other there.
Yeah,
so,
awesome.
Thank you for the interview, and that's it for now.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Thanks.